Hey everybody, it's Nigel Jenkins of Laughing Heart Music and LHM Records coming to you today from Steadybrook, Newfoundland and Labrador. Today I chatted with Dean Stairs. Dean and his wife Stevie run the Citadel House, which is a factor recognized recording studio, record label, and live performance venue located in Lewisport, Newfoundland and Labrador. Dean and I had a great chat about why he and his family chose to base themselves on the island, what it's like running a company in Newfoundland and Labrador from a rural setting, defining success for yourself as an artist and as an industry professional, and a bunch of other really interesting topics. So I hope you enjoy the chat. Before we jump into it, thank you very much to MusicNL and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador for sponsoring this video series through their Press On grant program. And thank you also to Nick Fay and the deputies all the way over in Saskatchewan for providing this sweet t-shirt that I wore today for my chat. Okay, hope you enjoy. Yeah, and I'm just going to start recording now so we catch everything. That worked fine. It was interesting actually because I guess the image is flipped. So like there's one.
Wow.
So the side of my face that I'm used to seeing be kind of off slant is on the other side. So I look really weird to myself. You look great though.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then we're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and the audio's sounding good. I see you've got a mic there, and I've got my hidden
Oh, cool. Yeah.
mic down here. So we might end up with one of the better sounding Zoom calls of all time right now.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a Roswell Audio Mini K47.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they're actually really nice, like handmade by elves in Burbank, I think.
Okay. I was gonna say you didn't get that one here in Newfoundland.
No. I custom ordered it, but they're a great company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what I think will happen here, Dean, is after our chat, I'm going to sit down and record a little intro that I'll kind of plop into the front of it based on what we actually end up talking about.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Makes
I
sense.
think for the sake of our conversation, let's assume that I do a great job of telling everybody what Citadel House is all about.
Perfect. Yeah.
And we can jump into more specifics. But yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to start. It's a MusicNL funded video project. And
Yeah.
so one of the things I'm chatting to with the industry folks from here in the province that I'm going to be talking to is, their sense of place, why they live in Newfoundland, why they chose to live in Newfoundland and Labrador, and how working in the music business impacted that decision. So can you speak to that for yourself? Sort of why Newfoundland and Labrador?
Well, a lot of it was timing. I happened to be, I describe it as I've had I don't know, it's coming on close to 40 years in the music industry. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's about that. And with a break for 11 years in the military.
Right.
I really
A break from music for a little stint in the military.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so I took about 18 months off during the initial training in the military. And so I've always been, even when I was doing straight jobs, I always worked in the military.
Yeah.
And I happened to be here when it was like, okay, it's time family size and stuff is starting to drive us outside of the military. I was in Gander at the time. And I just mentioned to a fellow, I said, what do we, I'd like a place with high ceilings, essentially, an office or a warehouse or something like that. And he was out on a drive the next day and was here in Lewisport, saw the old church for sale and mentioned it to me.
Yeah.
And, between the jigs and the reels, we knew that this was a great place to raise a family. And that's actually one of the hardest things to find, really, is a great place to raise a family. So quality of life was really something we were looking for, and what we defined as a high quality of life was available here in Newfoundland in the Bay. right?
Yeah.
Not much in the town, but in the bay.
Yeah.
And so that's why we settled here, right?
Can you explain that divide maybe for folks who are not from the island, the Bayman
Okay.
County divide?
Okay.
In the kindest terms possible.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one large urban area on the island.
Yeah.
The island is actually quite. I mean, it's geographically very large.
Yeah.
A large portion, I'd say it, at least half live in one section, and a large portion of those live in one small, well, one town, one city, and so there's always that you know, country mouse, city mouse thing that goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the two lifestyles are quite different, and yet we're all connected by the idea that we're on an island, and you know, the most eastern edge of North America, but still, it's quite different living here than it would be living in downtown St. John's. Right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was having a chat with my wife just last night. She was talking about how growing up, if she would have a good report card, they would get to go to Pizza Delight. And she grew up in Port au Choix, and I believe she said the nearest Pizza Delight was in Hawke's Bay. So
Wow.
it was a 40-minute drive to get to Hawke's Bay to get the Pizza Delight, and then a 40-minute drive to get back home to eat it. So by the time you got home, you know, you had to warm up the Pizza
It had to go in
Delight.
the oven. Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I mean, you know, I grew up in a military family also, so we were all
Right.
over the place in big cities and small cities, and yeah, I get a kick out of those different youthful experiences
Yeah.
that you have living in rural towns.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the, you know, some of the benefits of getting to operate a music company in a rural location, and some of the pitfalls, maybe, if there are any for you, of operating out of a small town in Newfoundland?
Well, off the top, a pitfall is that you are generally seen, at least here in this part of the world, that if you don't live in the city, then you're really probably not up to standard. So
Okay, interesting.
you kind of got to convince people, and that's becoming less and less of an issue, but certainly was a problem about 20 years ago. Because I mean, I've even been in radio interviews where people have said, well, surely, I mean, if you were that good, why wouldn't you live in town?
And are you talking specifically about sort of the label side of your operations,
No,
Dean? When you
that was a studio. No.
Yeah, sorry,
No,
that's what I meant. Yeah, studio. Yeah.
yeah. From that's just like a work for hire situation,
Yeah.
and that was sort of what started to drive us, because there's a couple things that we really found. I mean, Stevie and I, my wife and I, that we like working with people, and we like working with people. I mean, it's called, I guess now, mentoring, but we feel that our best option is being able to help people get past the pitfalls of the industry at an early age, if possible, at an
Right.
early start in their career. Okay, so the benefits to being in a rural situation where we're still, you know, we're an hour away from the Gander Airport, so that's, although
Mm-hmm.
that's a ways. I lived in downtown Chula Vista in San Diego, and we were an hour away from the airport there too,
Yeah.
right? It might have been like farther as the crow flies here,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but still, I mean, it was an hour away. You're an hour away from anything in San Diego. It takes that long to get there. Um, uh, but we have the opportunity here when we bring somebody out and we talk to them and we get a chance to work with them here, because this is why they come. They come
Mm-hmm.
here to record, and so it's a dedicated 7 to 10 day process that they come, they record the songs, and we have a chance to talk about all facets of their career, if possible, you know.
Yeah, well, and I mean, just to go back to, you know, finding that right space for yourselves too. I mean, you lucked out in terms of the physical building
Yeah,
that you ended up in. I mean, can you talk
yeah,
a little bit about the building and how it operates as a studio venue, all that?
yeah. So we were looking, like I said, for a place with basically, I mean, the only real criteria was high ceilings and a lot of space. It needed to have 4 walls and a roof that didn't leak, uh, because really we were gonna try and create a recording studio, and the recording studio
Yeah.
has a lot of unique structural issues in terms of acoustics and all of that. but the one thing you can't really do well is, I mean, if you have a natural air space above the microphones, that can't really be replaced. I mean, air and a big ceiling is just about what, that's the initial real criteria. So we happened to get, this building was built on the original Salvation Army's building plot. In 1951, it was started, and I think they commissioned it as a Salvation Army building in 1953, decommissioned it in 1983. It was a warehouse for about 10 years, like just a warehouse to help. I think they were shipping stuff to Labrador.
Okay.
And then it basically was vacant and became a guy's garage for a long time, for about another 10 years. And then they put it up for sale, and it went up for sale right at the beginning of the first cod moratorium, which if somebody isn't familiar with the history of Newfoundland, that's when basically the bottom dropped out of the largest economic driver in Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
And so the real estate prices just went through the floor, and we happened to be in the right place at the right time. So
that's an interesting sort of point to note, that in a time of crisis, there was an opportunity that opened up for you. I don't want to jump too hard into sort of our current situation, but have you found anything through the pandemic similarly where this very difficult time for a lot of people has opened up any opportunities for your company specifically, or for your artists?
Well, what our artists are doing is most of them are building really good, very specific recording spaces. So
right.
We recently signed Claire Follett, who's just a phenomenal producer, multi-instrumentalist.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
She's a unicorn. You're not going to see many of them in a lifetime. So she's put together a really great acoustic space. Nick Earl done the same thing, but Nick needs to be able to record guitars and vocals. That's really all he needs to do. But a good drummer that we work a lot with, Dan George, he's built an acoustic space for recording drums in his place. So if there's an opportunity that comes out of this, one of the things, I'm working on a song today, I can fire it off to Dan. Dan can have drums back to me tomorrow. So some of the things, speed is a benefit. There's still the real good benefit of being able to meet together in the same room and talk about your ideas.
Sure.
Before you start to put them down. But from the label perspective, there's a lot of people who are online, and we do a lot of our advertising online, right? So
yeah, we were talking a little bit about that before, and I thought it was interesting what you had said about your view as the label's job being to bring new audiences on for artists. It's sort of the artist's job on one hand to cultivate their existing audience, and then the label's job to bring new audiences on board for those artists. Can you talk a little bit about the sorts of things you're doing to help build those audiences?
Yeah, so this is a new direction, really, because in the beginning we kind of with the label maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we were basically doing what might be called a traditional, or it has become a traditional thing, where we were just doing a lot of the same things that you would do whether you were independent or not.
Sure.
That the label was just doing that. Okay. And then we decided that we actually weren't bringing as much value as we could. So we've gone out, we do 3 M's, music, money, and marketing, right? So these are the things that we bring.
If only 3M wasn't already taken.
Yeah,
that'd be a great business name.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. Good idea. M cubed. Anyway, so that actually is those are the driving things when I get up in the morning. What do I need to do today? I need to make sure the money is being handled okay. That's everything from budgets to what's actually going on day by day in each project. Where's the marketing at? And then am I creating new content somewhere within the company, right? So am I creating new music? So somewhere. So in terms of finding a new audience, We basically, if we have a brand new artist, in very large, broad strokes, what we would do is we will go out and we will advertise kind of where we think the person is, using sound alikes and trying to find an audience. We often find that we don't know the audience as well as we think we know the
Right.
audience. We have found a lot of traction in South America and Mexico City, India, Indonesia. These are the places that we're getting a lot better response from. And then we track that stuff through Facebook and then keep going back and gradually refining the target audience until, we're getting a really good return on dollar spent. Our ROI becomes quite good, $3 or 3 cents per response,
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So you're creating custom audiences and then sort of remarketing, retargeting to them, and
Yep.
sort of dwindling that audience down and down until you've got sort of a super refined core audience base. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so we start like if we start with the initial South America sounds like Led Zeppelin, Kiss, that sounds like that you'll get about 8 to 10 million people.
Sure.
And then you go, okay, with this ad, the demographics that responded best were within this range, and then you just keep refining it. When you hit about 1.5 million people, it's ticking along pretty well.
Right.
And 1.5 million people, you can like go for that audience for a long time before you're going to ever come back to the same people you started with. So
yeah. And just for folks who might be listening or watching, are we talking about like using Facebook Ads Manager for Facebook and Instagram advertising primarily? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's and if I can get into Google targeting and basically, I heard Zoe Keating. She's a cellist who was sort of like the first adopter in Twitter, and she's described the internet as basically controlled chaos. So you use as much as you're comfortable with, as much chaos as you can handle, and
right.
then when that becomes comfortable, then you expand to a new level of chaos, basically, until you become really comfortable at that level. And so right now,
Right.
Facebook, Instagram, we're facing eyes into that, right? And then and that's a good response. We're getting a good response with that.
Yeah, well, maybe to flip back to something you said earlier, I think a lot of the industry is chaos, especially for new artists. And you said part of your job as a mentor is to help artists avoid some of the pitfalls, which I'm sure a lot of them come from that chaos. Are there any sort of pitfalls you see artists here in the province, or maybe just new artists more generally, making, or things that you're trying to help artists sort of bypass when you take them on initially as clients?
I think the biggest thing with that would be managing expectations, okay, and recognizing that, especially as a record label, we are attractive to people who like a CD, well, for lack of a better term. They like a recorded project, okay?
Sure.
And so the first time out, generally people, you have to try and get people away from the idea that the destination is the CD.
Yeah.
The destination is the physical product, and that actually is not the destination. It's a stepping stone that leverages, you can use it to leverage other stuff. And so if the CD is the end of the whole game, then that's not going to work for you, right? It has to be a part of a larger business strategy that actually works. So when I'm writing up submission reports, or I'm writing up marketing strategies, we're always talking about, we're going to use this project, like the overall goal of the artist is to expand into these markets. We're going to use this project to leverage it in order to expand into that project or into that area by doing this, and this, right?
So helping them to see that, like, the physical project, that's not the end of it.
That's right.
That's another tool in your toolkit that you can use to create other opportunities for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it comes out from everything, because as much as you don't like it necessarily, but the truth of it is, within the industry, if you're working with an agent, or you're trying to get booked back into a place, often if you haven't got something new out within about 18 months, like you need that,
Yeah.
it becomes harder and harder to go back to the place. Um, a friend of mine who managed a Juno artist, a Juno winning artist here, um, found that out and said basically the cycle can't be much longer than about 18 months. If it goes longer than that, they'll basically, the agents will just start saying, well, call me back when you got something new, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I talk to artists I work with and, artists who I'm looking at taking on about that all the time. A lot of the industry is set up to support sort of 18 to 24-month album cycles. If you look at a lot of grant funding,
Yes.
if a
Yeah.
project is more than 12 or 18 or 24 months old, you're probably not going to be able to get tour support funding for it, or showcase support funding, or
Absolutely.
marketing funding.
Yeah.
And of course, we're in Canada, so a lot of our thinking and planning is based around, acquiring and spending grant dollars. How do you think about, uh, it's not a new model anymore, but the more regular release of singles with B-sides and EPs, smaller projects versus, going from one album cycle to the other?
Um, well, first off, I have to keep telling myself and just reminding myself that there is no single way to make this work in
Of
this
course
business.
not. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking in generalities.
Yep.
Um, I do think it's important to keep enough new content that you keep driving people back,
Mm-hmm.
but not so much that it becomes, you saturate, people become bored with it, or that it
Yeah.
starts to sound the same. So uh, that's where things like you can have a major studio release, for example, that goes out between 18 to 24 months. But if you have a series of shows and you're doing really well, record record 5 of them, put together a decent live album, and shove that out on digital only release. It's something to keep people interested and keep them coming back. I've at when With part of the live stuff we've done, it's been really interesting when you see a returning artist. I've been at the merch table when people have come up and said, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. And they're pointing to everything
Yeah.
the artist has, and they're looking for something new to buy,
Yeah.
and they go, and then they just walk away. They've already got it all, right? So even if it's a new T-shirt, right,
Yeah.
uh, that makes a difference. Just people are often at a merch table. They're just looking for a way to support the artist
Yeah.
and associate themselves with that artist. So T-shirts, hats, pins, all that kind of stuff at 3 or 4 different cost levels will make a huge difference for a touring band.
Yeah, one of the first artists I worked with was a real heavy tourer, and he made the observation, or made the point to me early on, that merch is really, it's about giving people the opportunity to purchase a souvenir to remember the show by. And
Absolutely.
there's going to be folks who can spend anywhere from $1 to you, all the way up on you, all the way up to $50, $100 at a show on top of the ticket that they paid. And
Yep.
keeping that merch table fresh and kitted out, and providing bundles at every sort of price point, I think
Yep.
super important.
I would do. I'm friends with the fellow out of Australia, Daniel Champagne, who is a master of that. He he he's just first off, he's a very likable guy, and you've got to be somebody that people will like. Uh, and
Yeah.
then and
Yeah.
then he's probably one of the top 10 guitar players in the world, so that kind of helps too. But
Right.
and he writes wicked songs, and he's a great performer. So, but he has a bundled price, and he was the first guy I saw up here, like upstairs and on our live show, where he didn't sell like one bundle. He sold 5, 10 bundles, and it was basically a bundle of everything on the table.
Right.
So in a depressed economy in Newfoundland, where we're out in the bay and there's not a lot of money rolling around, he got a lot of money by having all different price points.
Yeah. It's interesting. How do you think about, for your artists, helping them to build out all of the different revenue streams that can come from, the exploitation of music, sync, merch,
Oh, we
etc.
do. Okay, so first off, if we, uh, if there's a, we do everything we can to make sure that the tail end gets taken care of,
Yeah.
right? So that all of those revenue streams, CMRA, all the various forms of licensing, everything is taken care of. Uh, we see that as one of the M's, money.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that
Back to the
that
three M's.
yeah, that really is. So Stevie, my wife, does that. It's a thankless job. It probably takes 2 years before you start to see any real return on that,
Hmm.
but it does make a huge difference long term. But that's also part of the don't look at your career as ending at the CD, right?
Right.
That's just a stepping stone. You can now leverage this to do other things for you. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of uh, money and maybe going beyond it to sort of a big picture question, how do you think about success for yourself, for the company, and then for each of your artists, and how do you walk your artists through trying to figure out what success means for them?
Well, that's an interesting thing because as a label,
Hmm.
some of the artists that we work with have no desire to tour. They're happy with their day job. They don't want to do, they're 45 years old and they're happy but they put out great music and
Yep.
they're excellent communicators within the recorded format. So from a mercenary point of view, as from our point of view, they're worth us investing in, right? And so we can have a great partnership that way. So success for them is getting a really well recorded project that is marketed, that they don't have to do the marketing, they don't have to worry about it, they don't do anything for that, like that. Okay, so
Yeah.
success for them is that that's how where they define it. Success for some of our other artists, they're 18, hairs on fire, like they just want to go gig somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different world, right?
Yeah.
And we support them in a different way. We do all of the back end stuff, all the royalty stuff, all of that, because they're not thinking about that till they're 40 years old, right? And then
Yeah.
they realize they've lost 20 years of it. So we try and do all of that. And then, uh, the middle of the night, I'll get a message like, I just got my SOCAN check. Holy cow. Like, like what did you
Yeah.
do? You right? Uh, so, so success for them is having something that they can use to, as we said, to leverage in order to get more, to expand into a different region. They want to become a household name. They want to, now some of the other people, they want to use this as a sort of like a business card, a calling card to say, these are some of the things that I can do.
Yeah.
And I want to be a professional producer. That's what I want to do. I want to do that for someone else. So success is different. For us, we'd be happy to make what the average insurance salesman makes.
I don't know what that is in Newfoundland and Labrador right now. I'll have to ask my buddies at Sun Life.
I don't think the club's there anymore. There's a place in Edmonton. It used to be called, used to be there. It was called Sidetracks, and they did original music. It's where Katie Lang got her first big break, and a few other people. Okay,
Yeah.
so we were playing there, and there was a guy who was writing for the Edmonton newspaper, and he was interviewing us and talking to us, and he said, when people find out that you're in the music industry, if you're an insurance salesman, success is defined as the 2-car garage, 2 kids, white picket fence. But if you're in the music industry, they assume that the 2-car garage, the 2 kids, and the white picket fence is a failure because you're
Right.
supposed to be an MTV Cribs guy, right? So no, I'm happy to be able to take 2 weeks out of the year and go to the sun.
Yeah.
I just I really enjoy what we do, and I really enjoy being able to work in the industry. So to be able to do that and do it comfortably and have something that can become something I can pass on in terms of building a business, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I think about a lot. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there talking about if you're not at superstar levels of wealth, you haven't made it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you can make it at any level in between, sort of not generating any revenue from it, all the way up to that. I think about, playing pickup basketball versus being in the NBA.
Right.
Like, I can have a lot of fun playing pickup basketball on the weekends, and it might cost me $50 a month to do it. But I love it, and I get what I need out of it. I don't, and I might not ever, me specifically, I'm never going to be in the NBA. At 5'11", can't jump. But yeah, it's interesting. I like what you're saying, and I think it is so variable, and I think it's so important for people to sort of decide what it is going to mean for themselves, because the I think one of the core issues of trying to make a go in the music business is that it is such an aspirational industry, and you can climb up every rung of the ladder, and there's always going to be a next rung. And if you aren't satisfied with, where you're at with the process, if you don't love what you're doing for the sake of doing it, I think it can be a very draining for people.
I think it becomes very unhealthy mentally if you aren't comfortable with the process of the industry, and the fact that you are creating, you're speaking to society in one way or another. I mean, in this business, let's face it, a lot of the songs are relationship songs, but that's because most people want to be in a relationship. It makes sense that it is about that. Nobody, you don't have to write a protest song to be a successful folk singer.
Right.
I just think that there's as early as you can, if you can start thinking about, when I'm 65 and I got my grandkids on my knee, what do I want to tell them I did?
Yeah.
If you can start thinking in that term, then that changes where, okay, I don't have to become a superstar at any point, but I don't even have, there's a level that I need to get to, but as long as all the little steps are aiming in that direction, then I'm that's a form of success. That progress is moving in the right direction. Because if you don't do that and you say, I've got to jump from playing the guitar in my bedroom for nobody to playing in arenas for 40,000 people, and there's nothing in between, right? Then you're gonna have you're setting yourself up for heartache right from day one.
Yeah, I think if you try and skip steps, that's when you start hurting yourself. Another analogy I think about all the time is, because I started powerlifting in my late teens, early 20s, and I think about when you go to the gym the first time, you don't get to pick up the 100-pound dumbbells your first day and not get hurt. You got to start with those 3 or those 2-pound or those 5-pound dumbbells and spend your years putting in the time and putting in the reps. And I think it's the same thing for artists and for industry professionals. You got to pay your dues. I think about myself. I'm into this is my 5th year or 6th year in the industry, I guess. I incorporated the company in 2015, and I feel like I'm, just starting to get the hang of it.
Well, welcome, because that's Stevie. Every so often we go like, well, I think I said earlier on in the conversation, it was only like last year that we changed our focus to change it from just doing care and feeding of an existing audience to actually trying to bring a new audience, right? And so, like I said, I've been in and around the industry for 35 to 40 years, and we're, that's the beauty of the industry, but also the challenge. You always have to evaluate. You always have to just say, okay, if you're interested in, you got to be a rock star, you got to live in LA, you got to do that type of stuff. There's a whole other path. Not that that's not achievable at all. There's so much talent out there, but it's a different path than success defined as a healthy lifestyle, still being able to raise a family, and those types of things. right?
Yeah. So again, thanks to the folks at MusicNL and the province for supporting this. I want to end with just a couple of maybe more province specific questions. What do you think industry professionals, artists in the province could be doing to either help to build out the industry better, to create more community, to create more opportunities for artists and industry professionals? Is there anything we could be actively doing to make it easier or better for those of us operating from here?
Oh,
Tough question.
yeah, yeah. I would really like to see in all of Atlantic Canada, but definitely, absolutely in Newfoundland. I'd like to see industry people such as yourself, uh, more of us here, uh,
Right.
because there's so much talent. But that also means that the artist has to be willing to work with a team, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of artists in today's market that cut themselves off at the knees, because you can do a lot on your own at the early part of your career, but when you get to 5 6 years in, it starts to become more difficult than you want it to be, because you got to be answering calls and doing the show at the same time, right? I mean,
Right.
there's all of that. So getting a team and having a team in place would be a really big step, and making that a legitimate part of the industry, that there are people who do booking, people who are labels, and these are not evil parasitic guys in the industry, but they're actually adding to what's going on, right?
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of anti-label,
Oh yeah,
anti-corporation, anti-team rhetoric and conversation out there from artists who, at the higher levels of the industry, have been burned by some of those
yeah,
relationships. And I totally understand that. And I think some of those deals are unfair and exploitative.
absolutely.
But I don't think signing your life away to one of the big three companies in a 360 deal where they're taking 35% of the gross of every penny you make is the
Wow.
same as working with someone like, yourself, where
Yeah,
either you're doing master acquisition deals or licensing deals for fixed
yeah,
terms and splitting profits in an equitable way.
yeah,
It's very different. And I think there are, um, like you said, there are stepping stones that folks like you and I can help people
yeah,
cross over, things we can help them avoid or do right in the early stages of the career, that if they have the potential to scale up to that major label, sort of national, international star kind of level, you're going to get them there sort of uh, with a little less wear. So
yeah.
hopefully.
Well, a friend of mine, lawyer, an attorney friend of mine, who sits on the board at, at the ECMA stuff, and he said, I like one of the things he said about contracts. He said contracts are often defined, or seen as things that which define what the things you can't do. He said,
Mhm.
we if we change that and say that the contract is actually there to define the things that we can do together, right?
Right.
That changes the whole partnership right from the day one, right? And it doesn't have to be inequitable. I've signed those contracts as an artist back in the beginning, where
Yeah.
you made like 48 cents as royalty, and you had to sell 30,000 units to break even.
Right.
uh, you know
This is
you just were never going to dig out of that hole, right?
never going to recoup.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
And so, like, when we decided that we were going to work as a label, we wanted to make sure that we were doing something that was equitable,
Right.
and did actually strengthen somebody's career, and allowed for us to grow as well, right? So,
Yeah.
uh yeah, I think it's all very possible. I'm very excited about the level of talent, and now, I mean, the level of talent as musicians, but I think perhaps we're right on the cusp of the level of talent within the industry here also leveling up a little bit. And I'm really both you and I are not living in town,
Yeah.
So I think that that's a positive thing. I really do, because I think that it makes people reconsider what the options are. If you're talking about COVID, the work from home idea, I think is a major cultural shift
Yeah.
long term.
Well, I mean, I'm in kind of the same boat as you. You know, I was living in Halifax from 2010 to 2018, and things were going well with the business. But then I met my wife Stephanie. We got engaged,
Yeah.
and she's an optometrist, so it made a lot more sense for me to move back home so she could continue to run her business as normal. And so I've been operating from home basically or remotely since 2018. And we've got my mom and dad here, her mom and dad, my
Yeah.
sister and her husband. My brother just moved home. He's self-isolating in the basement right now. But you know, we've got everybody here, and that was the really important thing. And now Stephanie's pregnant, I think, as you know, and
Yeah.
so
Congratulations.
thanks. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so we'll have both sets of grandparents around, and I'm going to continue to run my business. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that there's a lot of, I think what's happening, perhaps coming out of the whole COVID and quarantine and all of that, even within the industry, certainly industry people such as yourself and myself are, it's not a negative to not be in a major center,
right.
it, right? Because even if you are living in a major center, you're not operating in, like, you're not networking in the way that you used to, right?
Well, I imagine, and I don't know, I haven't chatted with anyone who's in this exact situation, but I would guess that there are probably employees at companies in, you know, a city like Toronto who probably are going to be working remotely from Hamilton now, where they've been
Yep.
living and commuting for a couple hours a day, and now,
Yeah.
yeah, now they'll just choose to work from home.
I was talking to somebody, a music placement individual, and they've been working from home, oh, for quite a while actually. It was
Yeah,
leading up to COVID, but now they've, it's basically they do everything out of the house, right?
yeah,
So, and I think they might meet in Zoom
right,
once a week maybe, but that's about it. So,
right. Well, maybe
yeah.
just to close the chat, Dean, Zoom specific question. If there
Yeah.
was any artist alive today or industry professional that you could have a Zoom conversation with one-on-one for an hour, who would you chat to and why?
Oh, I don't know. There's so many that I respect. First off, for what they do musically, but really they got a sharp head when it comes to the business side.
Yeah,
Gene Simmons, man, he knows how to market.
the king well, maybe not Gene specifically, but Kiss did a bang up job licensing their
Yeah,
image for all kinds of products.
so smart, so smart, right from day one.
Yeah,
Don Henley, Glenn Fry, the Eagles, they did it for the same reasons.
yeah,
There's a lot of artists out there that just get the, I mean, even Mick Jagger and Keith Richards with the Stones, from
mm.
day one they saw it as a business, right? I'd love to sit in a room and pick those guys' brains, right?
It's interesting. I think about acts like that back in the day who would have been accused of selling out
Yeah,
for
but they,
engaging in those kinds of practices that, you know, we now see as sound business decisions. Do you
yeah.
think audiences and sort of people generally have the same sort of perception of artists exploiting their own music in those kinds of ways as selling out? Or do you think, you know, sort of the industry and the general population has moved towards a better understanding of, like, this is a business and these are things that we need to do to get by?
I think that people are more understanding of the fact that it is a business. I think generally, I say that generally, like is it Jay-Z started Tidal?
Yep.
Yeah. So I
one,
think
one of the partners there for sure.
yeah, so I think people are they understand. They don't look at that and go, "Oh my goodness, he's a suit and tie guy now." They look at it and go, "He's a smart businessman." Maybe that comes out of like Michael Jordan uh branding and
Right.
keeping control of his own copyright, his own image as well.
Well,
So,
certainly sports and music have had a huge influence on each other for decades. So
yeah.
That's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Dean, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but thanks for having the chat today.
Oh, this has been great. I appreciate it, and it's nice to be able to. It's either I talk to you or I sit in the basement.
Yeah. And I might add a thank you on to the end of this. This is my first one, so you're the first go, Dean. So we'll see.
Perfect.
This is still in the experiment phases, but just in case I don't add an ending onto it, thanks to the folks at MusicNL in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador for sponsoring these chats through their Press On program. And Dean, hopefully I'll see you real soon when restrictions allow for that to be possible at at a conference or out at Citadel House there or somewhere along the way.
Perfect. It'd be great. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, I'll stop the recording and then we can hop off informally. Okay. All right. Bye, Dean.
Bye.